10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Growing bolder, what's next?
Hello, I'm Laura Savini. Good day to you. I am so glad to see you here with us here on Growing Bolder, What's Next? Wow, go outside, take a deep breath. The seasons are changing. You can feel it, right? Oh, it's just, I love the fall. Let us know where you live because I'm in New York and we are producing from Florida. And we have a guest here today from Limerick, Ireland. So we're representing a lot of different geographical areas. And I know where I live. These leaves are green. They're not going anywhere yet. So let us know where you're watching from and what it's looking like where you are. And share with us throughout the whole program today. We've got a very exciting show, very enlightening show, I think is what I will say. You hear this term a lot lately that you went down the rabbit hole. Well, this morning, I am going to tell you about a rabbit hole that I went down that led to the remarkable meeting that I was able to meet this woman that you will be meeting shortly. Oh, that's really professional, isn't it? My earbud falls out. You're going to meet Nóirín Ní Riain, who is just this astounding person. And she's going to immerse us in Irish culture and music. And she's going to remind us of how important it is to be astounded. And she will regale you with tales of Irish myths and mythology and music and song. And you are going to fall in love with this lady. But first, I was looking through the news last night and I came across this just fascinating story of a man who passed in September. His name was Lion Garden Taylor Jr. Now get this, he is the older surviving grandson. There are two surviving grandsons of the 10th president of the United States. Okay, so his grandfather is the man there on the left, President John Tyler. And that's his own father there on the right. So Lion Garden Taylor Jr. is the older surviving son of our 10th president and part of this genealogical marvel that in just 3 generations spanned almost the entire history of the United States. Lion Garden Taylor Jr. died in Franklin, Tennessee. He was 95. That was in September. He was a lawyer and a historian. He has a 91-year-old brother who is still with us. Mr. Tyler was the president of the College of William and Mary in Virginia. His father was, and it's just a fascinating story. When his late grandfather, the president, was born, George Washington was being inaugurated. Okay, so can you just grasp this for a second? I'm having a hard time explaining it because it's so complicated. So his grandfather was born when George Washington was being inaugurated. Then he went on to become president, and this is his grandson. So he was born to a father who was 70. So this is a very bold and healthy family who has long life and just thrilling to think about the amount of history they've seen. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that very cool story. And now about that rabbit hole. So this was in December of 2018. My husband and I were invited to go to this dinner party, and it was a lovely dinner party. It was just full of artists and performers, and we were around a long table, and we had this wonderful dinner, and we're enjoying conversation. And then the host said, let's go around the table, and a few of you sing a song for us to the musicians. There were actors, poets, there was all sorts of people. So he asked a couple of the musicians around the table to stand up and sing a song. And several of them did. There was musicians from Europe and from Newfoundland, Canada, and from Nashville and New York. And he got around to this one young man who was from Ireland. And he said, "Molly, will you stand up and sing us a traditional Irish song?" And our guest was very bold in his own way, for sure. And Molly actually turned to him and said, I won't sing you a traditional Irish song. And everybody went, whoa, you're saying that to the host? He said, no, instead, I will sing for you an Irish hip hop song. And it turns out Molly is like this expert in Irish rap.
Because enlightenment, is where we're headed, so search for that center, you won't regret it. The guest list is vetted to the club on high, and not only superstars may apply, but I get scared in my life, and so I smile to keep my mind protected enough. We are all deeply connected, not to be ignored but celebrated. You articulated, cause we're graded, so let's hold hands and do the countdown thing, cause you bring that la-di-da. Keep the peace and follow that star, you're a wise one, that's coming from a far.
So that is Owen and Molly, who are the sons of the lady you're going to meet in a moment. But what happened is I met Owen and Molly, and I thought they were just terrific. Their style is fabulous. They're both incredible musicians with tremendous respect for ancient Irish culture and modern popular music and their own songs. And Molly is sort of like Bobby McFerrin, where he can be every instrument in the band. So if you have a moment to go back and watch that whole show, you'll find it on the Kate.tv. It's a fascinating show. So through my listening to Molly perform that night around the table there, I just became infatuated with his musical style, and I sort of cornered him and interviewed him all night long, and then was able, by the spring of that year, produce a TV show with him and his brother, who you just saw a bit of that. And then, the whole world changed and things got crazy. COVID came in and just all these things happened. And I was feeling that I really needed a burst of creativity. I needed something to help me get out of this funk we were all feeling from being in the house for so long. So Owen and Micheál O'Sullivan were telling me about a course that they were teaching with their mother. And I said, you know what? I want to sign up for that. And in this course, I was introduced to things that I had just never been exposed to before, to these ancient Irish myths and Celtic tradition and song and poetry and writers that just weren't in my typical day-to-day life. And it inspired me so much. I learned so much, and I met wonderful people. This is all over Zoom. You can do it too. And we would go into small groups, and I met these incredible people from all over the country. And it was really something awesome. And I wanted to know their mother more. So lucky me, I have the chance to be here on Growing Bolder, What's Next? So I called her up and said, hey, can we do an interview here? And now you are going to have the opportunity to meet this wonderful woman. Coming up right now, you are going to meet Nóirín Ní Riain. She is the mother of those two lovely boys, and she is also known as the High Priestess of Gregorian Chant. How do you like that? She's a singer, an interfaith minister, a doctor of theology. She coined a discipline of listening to the divine, which just intrigues me to no end. She's released 16 albums since 1978, including 3 with her sons. Her voice has rung out for peace on many continents, including United Nations conferences and gatherings with the Dalai Lama. And with that, I am welcoming to Growing Bolder, What's Next, Nóirín Ní Riain. Hi, hello to you, Nóirín.
Go many díogait Laura, agus the Cháirde Chuin atá éisteacht ling. And I am like a little girl now, so nervous and excited to be on Growing Bolder. Because, of course, you see, Laura, nobody teaches us how to grow old, to age well. No one teaches us the possibilities, the magic moments that there are in aging, the mystical moments.
Right. We don't learn that. And that's our goal here, is to share some of those moments. And I know you have some for us. So before we get too deep in, just tell me quickly, you're coming to us from County Limerick.
In Ireland. County Limerick is down here. Let's say this is a bad map of Ireland. And I know sure there are 80,000 people over there of Irish blood, but here am I, down here. So quite near Shannon Airport. Dublin is over here on the other side. So it's a wonderful day here. Believe it or not, Laura, it's not raining. So we have, as we say in Ireland about the weather, you know, if you don't like the weather in Ireland, wait a minute. Our weather is as volatile and as eccentric as ourselves. I think we work in tandem in that way. But if we can connect our little university, because that's really what you're offering, is a university for aging, and it's wonderful to be asked to be a student or even a graduate of this university. In Ireland, we have a tradition that when we're born, Laura, that a candle is ignited in the heavens for us, just the minute we're born. And so that candle remains lighting. It's a wonderful image because sometimes a flame can get very shaky if the storm gets rough, or indeed it can burn very brightly. Sometimes, of course, a candle can be very big, representing our long lives, particularly for us here in Growing Bolder. But sometimes, as we know, it can be quite a short candle. So to join our energies, let's create a rainbow of light from my little home here in County Limerick to wherever you are. And I know, Laura, you have one over there too to connect us.
I do have a candle lit, and I hope that if you're watching, maybe you have one close by and you can light one and join us in that rainbow of light. I love that thought. So we're all connected through that flame.
And like in Ireland, when we say too that somebody, we would never say somebody died.
What would you say?
We would say, Tá a chuinneal mochta vrecha an lei. I'll say it again. Tá a chuinneal mochta vrecha an lei, which means that her candle is extinguished before the dawning of the day. Because, of course, we know and believe that the next life is going to be a Mardi Gras. We're going to have a great time all together. This is merely a rehearsal for it. And that there's a man nearby here, because I was brought up, Laura, beside where I'm living, actually. I'm very fortunate to sort of have done the full circle. But the man nearby used to always say, but sure, heaven must be a better place because nobody has ever come back.
I love that, Nóirín. You know, it's interesting. We're not supposed to ever make generalizations, but if I may for a moment say that we know that the country of Ireland, you can drive from north to south in just 3 hours. It's not a very big place compared to, think of how it fits just like maybe in 2 states of the US. It's probably smaller than Texas is my guess. And yet your country just delivers incredibly in-depth culture, music, storytelling, and a way of speaking that just the few words you've said already, they just get me. You know how to speak and use the language. And why do you think that is? Why does Ireland have such an incredibly rich culture that just hypnotizes the rest of the world?
I'll tell you now, Laura. I think it's our connection with the soil. We are very much in respect, in awe of the 2 worlds, of course, because in Ireland, even we are mystified by this and we find it mystical. In Ireland, we have 2 worlds. We have the visible world, which is up here, and then we have the invisible world, which we are interacting, particularly at this time, which is November, the time of Samhain, as we'd say, but more of that anon. But so I think we have maintained that connection to our sacred places. Everywhere you turn in Ireland, there's a sacred site where thousands of years ago, people connected. People were interconnected and also connected with the divine. And of course, we'll all call the divine by a different name, all 7.5 billion people of us. But we know, and we've maintained it. And we are a great little country, Laura, because for our size, are we 5 million? I don't know. But we were the first to bring in legislation, of course, for same-sex marriages. Overnight, we threw out our plastic bags. And we all now carry our little bags in the car, our ecological bags. We don't smoke anymore indoors. And we're just a great, and as you say, 4 Nobel poets for literature. And I think too, we have at this troubled time too, Laura, I really feel Ireland has a lot to contribute to peace and to a new way of being, a new way of living. We call it here, this COVID time, this time of a virus, we call it cocooning. And I think that's quite a good term, because we are beavering away, ready to emerge with new energy, new possibilities, new life, new directions for the world.
That is such a beautiful way of describing it, of calling it cocooning. I just love that. It's so positive. It's putting a positive spin on what's happening right now. You did something very bold in your life. You've of course had this very long, wonderful career in music, and you are a collector of songs, which I love that term. It's something I learned years ago that I didn't realize, that you actually go around and look for songs. Can you just tell me a bit about that? You collect keening songs.
Mm-hmm. And a song, you see, Laura, is a story. Ultimately, it's a story about a person, the same as myself and yourself, but who have turned to creating poetry and then adding on a layer of music to it. So we have a lovely proverb in Ireland, which is Muscéil féin, scéil gach duine. Muscéil féin, scéil gach duine, which is my story, is everybody's story. So what fascinated me was how people are coping with love, with anger, with desire, with love of nature, and of course with grief. And so I was particularly edging out, or trying to find out how people coped with grief. And of course, us as older people, we will all have experienced grief in our lives. And so there is this very powerful repertoire of lamentation, coinas, as we call them in Ireland. Very, very small now. But a lot of them indeed are religious, spiritual laments, where Mary is at the foot of the cross, lamenting her son. So a little song like this, I'll just give you a little blast of one of this, where Mary is in dialogue. She said, "Who is that fine man on the passion tree?" And he talks down to her and says, "'Tis your son, dear. No, you're not me. But don't be keening, because I'm just simply going into an invisible form, and I will always be with you." Is no be Croite, agus mochono, agus mochono.
That is so beautiful. I feel the reverberations of that through my whole body. It's that those words are beautiful, even though we don't comprehend them. The sound of them is very moving. And I guess that is what a keening song is. It's something that makes you feel like that.
So you're expressing the grief within yourself, but also for the listener. And when we were talking about you, my mind is racing now with when you were asking me about Ireland and what it is that's special about it. I think we are very good listeners. And, you know, we listen a lot to one another, and we listen to the ground, we listen to the trees. The Fionn McCool, one of our great legendary mythological figures, one time, Laura, his followers, na Fianna as they were called, came to him and they said, Fionn, what's your favourite music? Is it the song of the birds? The roar of the sea? Is it the wind through the breeze? What is your favourite music? And Fionn said to them, none of those. I love all of those that you've said, but my favourite music is the music of what happens. And so I think we're listening all the time for that music of possibility, that nudge to do something, which is so important for us as we age, never to resist dreaming our visions or creating our dreams.
Say that for me again. It's the listening to the music of possibility.
Of what happens.
Of what happens. Listen to the music of what happens. How do we do that, Nóirín? How do we listen to that?
I suppose silence is also very important to maintaining that silence in the here and now. Of course, the Buddhists are great too. You know, they will always say that there are only 2 days that you shouldn't do anything. Yesterday and tomorrow. And that it is at this time of the here and now, H-E-A-R, as well as H-E-R-E. But silence is so important. I think we're kind of good at it in Ireland too, actually. Going out into nature and being silent. And of course, if you throw down those 6 letters of silent, you'll get listen. So that only works, of course, in the English language. And then, of course, what's very important to us too, Laura, which is why I just started with a few words, is our language. Our language is the music of our souls. The Irish language is a very, very special, ancient language. And that's very much connected, of course, with the divine too. I have a friend, who says he's an Irish speaker as well, and we all always speak in Irish when we meet. And he says, you couldn't be an atheist and speak in Irish. Because even when we say, as I said to you when we started, Laura, Gamin Diachit, that is, may God be with you, Laura. And so that namaste, you know, that we have in India, the divine in me recognizes the divine in you. We are exactly the same. And we say, Diachit, God be with you, Laura. And then you say to me, Dia is Mirachit, God and Mary be with you, Nóirín. And then I come back and I say, okay, Laura, Dia is Mira is Pádraigh, and that's God and Mary and Patrick be with you, Laura. And then you come back to me and we go through all the saints, all the whole plethora of saints there. And we don't get any work done, and we certainly grow older as we do it.
Oh, that's funny. Well, you know, we got to hear a bit of your singing there. So I'm not going to play the tape we were going to do because we'll run out of time, but we got to hear that beautiful voice. And you have been able to sing all over the world. And you just mentioned Namaste. So you actually spent some time in India with the Dalai Lama. Can you explain how that came up and what you learned there with him?
Right, my goodness. So much from that contemporary saint, really. But the Indian connection was different, actually. That wasn't the first connection I had with His Holiness was in Costa Rica. Oh. And that was fun, actually, Laura, because it was introducing him, bringing him in to San Jose, into the theatre there for a week long, which was wonderful. Not just in the honour of it, but honestly, Laura, the wisdom that I learned from that man, because of course I would sit at his feet then while he'd be lecturing for 3 hours or talking for 3 hours, you know. And my goodness, all the different nuggets of wisdom, like make sure you help people and not hurt them.
Mm-hmm.
You know, my temple is my heart. I don't need philosophies, complicated philosophies, he'd say. All my philosophy is kindness, you know. And again, we were talking about talking too. He'd always say, listen more than you talk, because when you talk, you're only sharing what you know already. But when you listen, you're learning something new, you know. And that the most important thing in life is to have a good heart. A good heart. You know, there's just some, but there's so much wisdom from that man. And of course, his great sense of humor then too. So then when he came to Ireland, he's been here, I think, 3 or 4 times. I was invited to surround him in song and as a blessing for when he would speak. And that was fun because I'm a kind of a screechy banshee of a singer, you know. And
I don't think that's true.
When I start up preaching, people say, oh, where did he come from? You know? So I don't like that. I did surprise His Holiness a few times when I start up. And it's just, as I say, a contemporary saint, really.
A contemporary saint. I love the idea of that. Soon after you did your work with him, this is where we come into what I was starting to say earlier, is this bold move you made, growing up Catholic in Ireland. I mean, that is a lifestyle. That is a lifestyle. And you decided at 67 to become an ordained minister. This means leaving, not being part of the Catholic Church in a sense, because women can't be ministers in the Catholic Church. Explain this. Explain what happened there and why you made this decision.
Well, that move had been a long time growing within me. Yes, brought up very strongly Roman Catholic and lived in a Benedictine male monastery for 16 years, which I'm now on the edge of, and following the daily round with the monastic community. But as Anais Nin has a very beautiful phrase that summarizes the move. She says, the time came when the pain to remain in the bud was more painful than the pain to blossom.
Wow.
So, even though can I read you a little excerpt from something, Laura?
Sure, please do.
In 2008, I wrote an owl book, autobiography. Now, this is 2008, way before this ever was a possibility that I might be ordained as an interfaith minister. And so, theme 8 is the little priestess. I can't remember exactly when I first began the ritual of stealing into my parents' bedroom to say Mass. But I can recall vividly the moment when the whole fantasy fell apart. You see, every day around 4 o'clock, that parental bedroom became a private chapel where I said rather than heard Mass. The centerpiece of that room was a small fireplace of brown and grey tiles, which faced the big bay window, and I would stand up on the little ledge of the fireplace, and being ahead of my time, because of course this is pre-Vatican II, when the priest would always turn his back to the congregation. But being ahead of my time, I would stand on the ledge of the fireplace and face out towards my congregation. To the left of the altar, on the ledge of the fireplace, was a statue of Mary. At its dead center was a black and white crucifix with a 3-dimensional image of Christ. With my mother and father safely away, I imagined the room was full of characters, all hanging on my every word for redemption and salvation. We quietly chanted the Our Father together, and I sang, Regina Caeli Laetare, while my invisible flock made their way to me for Holy Communion, which I doled out to them in the form of round white mints. My sacristy was the landing outside the bedroom door. Now, one afternoon, as I was returning my stole, which was a dark green scarf of my mother's, I was returning it to the chest of drawers, and I passed my big brother after I had just said Mass. "Noel," I said, "I'm going to be a priest when I grow up." I told him excitedly. "Don't be so ridiculous, Nóirín," he said. "You can't even be an altar boy, not to talk of a priest." That was the first time I realised that the priest saying Mass every Sunday in our parish would never be a woman. Devastated that I could never minister to humans, my mission then became to convert, at the very least, animals, the animals around me. Very little conversion was needed. Animals have an innate sense of the spiritual and the silence. They are undercover mystics. I started with my little cocker spaniel, Banner, after school each day, when all the poor dog wanted was to be taken for a walk. I would first insist that we bless our walk with a prayer. As I'd tickle him under his front paws and sing to him, he'd wriggle his little head from side to side with pleasure. I firmly believed that this little dog was really sent to me from his anagrammatic namesake, God. I then pressed onto my mother's hens. They supplied us with what are now called organic or free-range eggs. And to show my thanks, I vowed to bring them to God through listening. Every morning and evening, with my little Sugon chair under my arm, I invaded the hen house and insisted that these fowl sing the Our Father to be saved. And as I chanted each line, I waited for them to respond. And they did. They did. And into conversion.
Nóirín, you have had such a life and such a deep thinker from so early on. I'm fascinated by that, and that you went ahead and did it. Just because we are going to run out of time soon, just tell us why now. What is the blessing that you get? What is the growth that you feel from being a minister and becoming a minister? And now you've been one for a few years. And you're an interfaith, meaning you might minister to someone Jewish or someone Muslim or someone of any religion.
And none. And none.
And none.
Oh, it's been the most satisfying step that I've ever taken in my life, because I've always wanted to minister to people, Laura. And I suppose singing was that for a long time, that you said, yes, you were just enhancing people's lives, not through myself, but being a conduit for the divine, because I have a great connection. I was a very lonely child, and indeed lonely most of my life, but just felt a great connection all the time with an other, a friend there. And so now to stand beside people and to be able to legalize their weddings. And of course, I would do a lot of same-sex marriages. It's such a wonderful honor and privilege. Also, of course, I will stand beside people in grief, in places of loss. And that's been particularly harrowing during this experience, virus experience. But then I do naming ceremonies, blessings of buildings, of houses, divorce rituals, of course, because being divorced myself, I have an insight into the pain that can be and what a ritual can do to alleviate that pain. Because all of these things I know from my own, we were very, very happily, we had a marvelous organic relationship with the father of the two boys there. He passed over just 2 years ago at this time. And we remained great friends. But a time came when we knew we were holding each other back. And so we went our separate ways. But still, he came to my ordination in 2017, and I sang at his wedding.
Wow. That's now right there. That's very emotionally bold for the two of you to be able to do that. It takes a lot of strength to recover from a divorce. And so now you're helping people through that, through your ministry.
And I've done stuff online too. I did a wedding online in America, a Mormon wedding. And so I've done all sorts of wedding, funeral testimonials, so on. Because we have a lovely tradition here, Laura, in Ireland, that 1 month after a person dies, you come back again and you remember that person. Because there is sort of a belief that it kind of takes a month really for the soul to leave the body, to say goodbye to the body, to thank the body for looking after it all those years.
These wonderful rituals and traditions that you have in Ireland and that you and your sons have collected, you do something wonderful. I mentioned earlier, I took this course with you over the summer that taught me so much. You're offering one now about letting go of the ghosts of your past. Explain to us what that class is.
Lovely.
And we would love to invite our listeners. They'll have our audience. They'll have the chance to experience more of what you and your sons have to offer.
And we'd love to have you too, Laura and Michael and Bill, everybody. We call it Thrust Tonum, Journey of the Soul. Trust is a journey of the soul. And so particularly we're very excited about this one coming up because in Ireland we have 4 major festivals. We've one, the 1st of November is the one we're celebrating now coming up, which is Samhain, which is an old Irish word for the end of summer. And so we're now going into the dark side of the year. And of course, as you know, the dark side, we need the darkness to create the light. Light, yin and yang, we need both. And so we'll be exploring, very much facing to in Samhain. It's a time for welcoming people who've passed over and welcoming the people from the underground. So they will come up on the 31st of October. And you can feel that. In Ireland, we always say it's very dangerous to come to Ireland on Samhain around this time. But you can come to Ireland virtually. And so we are offering that. And so we will be talking and musing about all sorts of, there's 5 days. And so 2 hours on each day. And
I think we have that information we can put up and show. There we go.
Thank you so much. Lovely. And so it's then, so I'll be here in my little house, which I call Immel, which means the edge. And the edge, because I'm on the edge of the monastery where I lived for 16 years. And so I can hear the bells and so on still. But also, I think to growing bolder, Laura, we're actually living on the edge very much at this time of our lives, which is a very exciting place to be, on the boundary, on a threshold, a time of great possibility. So we'd love to. Oh, yes, and we'd love to offer you a little gift to around that. And thank you very much for it. So Samhain, you'll see that word there, making peace with the past.
Great. And that's wonderful. So you and your sons are offering a discount to the Growing Bolder audience. And let me tell you, it is really an incredible experience to spend time with her and her sons. Their sense of humor is so well developed, and their way of speaking and listening. I've learned so much just from listening to how you speak and how you pause and let it sink in, and just this journey through poetry and tradition that you will take us on during that class. I think it'll be fabulous. Before I let you go, please say a word about, you and I are big fans of that remarkable poet of Mary Oliver. Yes.
So much. And like her 3 lessons, which of course she puts them so beautifully, but they're universal too, which is pay attention. In Ireland, like we were always taught in school, be queuing, that means pay attention. But what she's talking about, attention, attendre, listening, pay attention through listening, And then as you're paying attention, of course, that's just the message of Buddhism too. Bud is simply a word for awake, Bud, B-U-D-D-H. And again, Seamus Heaney, our wonderful poet, would say that, had I not been awake, I would have missed it. Had I not been awake, I would have missed it. And then be astonished at the small little things, as you were talking about beautifully there, Laura too, and we'll be mentioning there. Just be amazed by everything. And then, of course, tell about it. I think that's the wonderful message of Growing Bolder too, is that we have an obligation there to teach, to share, to tell about it, the tiny little nuggets of wisdom, to leave them behind us. Because as Rumi says, we're not in the tomb when we die. We're in the hearts of the people that we've met.
That is just gorgeous. I love the way you're able to just draw on all of these wonderful poets, just pull them out of your mind. You really are an incredible woman. I thank you for growing bolder with us, for sharing a different kind of knowledge that we don't often get to experience. Thank you for that, Nóirín.
Laura, so much. It's been such an honor. And I just love you as a soul sister. Honor my fool, as we'd say in Irish. Slán the Coil. And hopefully we'll see you soon on one of our courses. Thank you.
I hope so too. Thank you, Nóirín, for being here with us today. Thank you so much. Now, that was not planned, but Nóirín had the same idea in mind that I did for our meme. So she just shared with you that wonderful instructions for living that we had from Mary Oliver. And that leads me on my mind. To me, it's so important to be astonished. And I want to share that with you because when we're in this time right now, when things are a little overwhelming, shall we say, maybe it's time to turn off the news, stop listening for a little while, and find something positive. Find something that is astounding and astonishing to you. Maybe it's asking your Google or your Alexa to play a song you haven't heard in a while and just relive what that beautiful feeling of music is. Maybe it's going outside and doing what Nóirín was talking about, just listening to the silence, hearing the birds, seeing the birds, watching the leaves change, taking a walk, taking a bicycle ride. And that leads me to a little personal story I want to share with you this week. That's me on my bike. This is my piece, is riding on this beach, this simple little tiny beach near my house. And on Tuesday, I was out on my bicycle and a neighbor caught me in action. Now, he had this incredible lens on his camera. He was probably 3/4 of a mile away, and he caught me just as I was turning up to go back to my house. But what I love about this ride, what was astonishing to me during this ride was there was a seagull, and he and I were speeding up at just about the same time. And I was right under him as I was riding my bike. And it was just this beautiful feeling of being free and flying. And I just wish that for all of you, that you can be out somewhere and feel like you're flying. And the other thing that was astonishing was the background of that picture. Through his lens, he was able to show me things I never saw in my own neighborhood. So you go out and look for something in your own neighborhood that you've not been able to see, that you haven't noticed before. Just get away from the stuff that's driving you crazy and enjoy the world for a little while. And then if you need some additional inspiration, go to growingbolder.com, go to our Facebook page. You will always find inspirational interviews, sayings, things to read, tips on living. Growing Bolder is a fabulous place for you to find tips for living that bold, astonishing life. So I invite you to do that. And one more thing before we go, support your local restaurants. It is such a tough time for them right now. If you can fit it into your budget to go visit a local restaurant this weekend, that would be a great thing. Thanks to everybody. Thanks to Nóirín, who was with us today. Thanks to Michael, who's in the background there helping me out. Have a wonderful weekend, and we'll see you back here on What's Next Friday.
Growing bolder, what's next?